Well, I'm often referred to as a criminal without a criminal record, which is quite funny. I woke up the morning after my wife died and there was a thing.
What happened to Brittany Murphy? Years of silence have passed, and now her mom, Sharon Murphy, is ready to talk. In this uncensored, unprecedented exclusive, Sharon breaks her silence and finally tells the untold story behind her daughter's mysterious death. The revelation you have waited for may finally answer questions haunting Hollywood for over a decade. If there is one story that has completely stolen the attention of the public in the world of Hollywood secrets buried beneath a glitz and glamour cloak, it would have to be that of Brittany Murphy. How could such a young, vibrant talent have met such a tragic, untimely end? The multifaceted actress was notorious for movies like Clueless and 8 Mile at the tender age of 32 years. She mysteriously died in 2009. Her death had left her fans in a state of shock and brought a vacuum in the Hollywood industry. But Brittany's demise followed a wave of speculation, rumors, and questions that only grew with time. For years, Brittany's mom, Sharon Murphy, has kept silent, dignified through the firestorm that was stirred up around her. Being the one closest to Brittany during the last days of her life, Sharon was beset by both grief and public scrutiny. The death, just 5 months later, of her son-in-law Simon Monjack, under eerily similar circumstances, on even more fuel to the fire, prompting further speculation about what occurred in the Murphy-Monjack household. Theories ran the gamut from toxic mold in their home to foul play, and the media frenzy grew as the years went on. Many expected Sharon to speak out, offer clarity, or refute more outlandish claims. She has largely remained out of the public eye. The silence had only carved a chasm, which in time was filled with speculation and uncertainty, while more than a decade later, what happened in the last days of Brittany remained a mystery. But now, finally, Sharon Murphy has broken her silence. Here, in this exclusive and deeply personal interview, she speaks candidly for the first time about the heartbreaking events that surrounded her daughter's tragic demise, the devastating impact that this crime had on her life, and why she chose such a long period of silence. Sharon's revelations shine a new light on the tragedy, a perspective nobody else could provide: mother's perspective of love, loss, and pursuit of truth. Now, we are going to delve deep into Sharon Murphy's long-awaited account, following a decade of life-changing insights and revelations. We'll take a closer look at the new details that have come to light, and how Sharon's testimony might finally bring closure to one of Hollywood's most haunting mysteries. And, as we begin to listen to her words, we know more about the woman who silently bore the tragedy and the scrutiny of the public, while knitting together a story behind the story behind a story. Tune in as we work our way through twists and turns to get down to the real story of what happened surrounding Brittany Murphy's death and how that event affected the people who loved her most. This is a story of a mother's grief and at the same time her strength to honor the memory of her daughter as she faces hurtful realities that have shaped her life since then. Sharon Murphy was finally ready to speak words that could explain a mystery that has hung in limbo for far too long. Early life and background. Brittany Murphy was born on November 10, 1977, in Atlanta, Georgia, to Angelo Bertolotti and Sharon Kathleen Murphy. Quite early in her life, she faced several changes. One of these was that her parents separated when she was just 2 years old. Sharon was strong-headed and independent, thus dedicating herself to raising Brittany alone. It is during this nascent stage of her life that this strong mother-daughter relationship between Brittany and her mother starts to get close. Brittany was a natural performer as a child. This high-energy little girl who would entertain her mom with impromptu performances all the time. Sharon recognized early on Brittany's innate talent and actively pursued and encouraged her daughter's artistic inclinations. When Brittany was serious enough about being an actress, Sharon relocated to Los Angeles to help her daughter accomplish her dream. This turn in Brittany's life would set the stage for her future stardom. It wasn't long before she started to make a name for herself in Los Angeles. Attending Herbert Hoover High School in Glendale, Brittany juggled academics with auditions and acting classes. Brittany had been among the budding acting faces in an aggressive industry, but she was determined, and her inborn talent did not go unrecognized. Her big break came when she was just 13, with her landing a role in the hit series Blossom back in 1991. This was just the beginning of great things to come in her career, as Brittany grew up from being a child actress to becoming a Hollywood star in her own right. By this time, Sharon remained a consistent supporter of Brittany. The bond was exemplary, too close for a usual mother-daughter relationship. Sharon was more than a parent. She was Britney's confidante, manager, and best friend. A lot of people remarked on this unusually close-knit relationship, and many further observed that Sharon was that one thing constant in Britney's ever-changing world. That bond would later be both a source of strength and, in many ways, also a subject of public fascination and scrutiny. Rise to fame. Brittany Murphy's rise to fame was as swift as it was impressive. Her breakout role came in 1995 when she was cast as the character Ty Frazier for Amy Heckerling's cult classic Clueless. The movie clicked instantly and went ahead to become one of the teen movies setting a mark for the 1990s. She played the part of Ty, the gawky duckling turned beautiful swan, with such depth that brought her wide praise. Her acting was just about as real and funny to convince anybody that this was one of the finest young actors who had a promising future in the acting world. After the phenomenal hit of Clueless, Britney started building her career bit by bit with various characters that showed her versatility. In 1999, she did the psychological thriller girl. Interrupted with Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie, Britney played the sensitive girl with an eating disorder. Daisy Randone in this movie. So powerfully haunting was her acting that she received critical acclaim for this role and made her name as a serious actress who could handle complex and challenging roles with finesse. In 2002, Britney reached another level of recognition within the drama film 8 Mile, opposite Eminem. She played the love interest of Alex Latterno, a role which depicted not only her vulnerable side, but also how much development and wit an actor can take while playing a character. The movie proved to be a success with both critics and at the box office, and Britney's performance was part of its significant appeal. At about this time, she also voiced the character Luann Platter in the extremely popular animated television show King of the Hill. It was a show to which she would return over more than 10 years. The work in King of the Hill showcased her talent for voice acting and added another dimension to her already impressive resume. But perhaps one of the most remarkable gifts Britney displayed as an actress was the facility with which she segued between comedy and drama to animation. She did a variety of challenging roles and never got stereotyped into one. Be it that strangely comical best friend, the ingenue with problems, or the feisty romantic lead, Britney brought a certain charm, intensity, and relatability to each character. That versatility has made her an easily loved director and audience favorite alike, thus ensuring her steady rise in Hollywood. Britney's personality and public image. With the rising star that Britney had slowly become, people could not help but be interested in her personal life. Being described as bubbly, vivacious, and full of life by those who get the chance to talk to her, she is one of the qualities that have served to make her such a darling on and off the screen. Her irrepressible energy and warm, down-to-earth manner soon made her a favorite with fans. She was rapidly gaining a reputation as one of Hollywood's most appealing stars. Britney seemed to glow with happiness and optimism when talking in interviews about her work and people close to her heart, especially mom Sharon. Behind the glitter of Britney's life, things were a lot more complex compared to what came across with the smiling, ebullient personality. The stress of fame, unrelenting media scrutiny, and tensions of a career at breakneck speed took their toll on her life. Speculation about her body image problems filled the tabloids, fed by sometimes impossibly idealistic standards of beauty that had come out of Hollywood. Even Britney herself would later admit that it was hard to have good self-esteem when one belonged to an industry so unkind about those things. Most of the relationships Britney were under media scrutiny. Her on-screen marriages, like with Ashton Kutcher in the movie Just Married, released in 2003, which she also starred and received a lot of coverage. However hard Britney tried to keep private issues out of the public eye, it was constantly and endlessly stressful. As much as Britney tried to stay professional and concentrated, this was just the kind of life that could not be helped under constant scrutiny. Later in her career, Britney started showing signs of wear and tear. Rumors of sickness and stress from career demands started catching up with her. A contrast came about between the glittery, alive on-screen starlet and the trials that Britney battled in private. Friends and colleagues remembered Britney, invariably bright on screen and cheerful, was struggling much with turmoil internally. It wasn't until her sudden death that this glittering public Britney still stood in tragic contrast to how often hellish her private life was. Such suddenness in her passing, although truly shocking to those who knew her, shook millions of fans wide as a realization grew. They loved Britney because of her talent, warmth, and vivacity. The years that have passed since then have only legitimized Britney's legacy. It has materialized in both her brilliant career and the questions of her death that remained unanswered, leaving their mark not only on Hollywood, but most of all on those closest to her. Circumstances surrounding her death. Brittany Murphy died on December 20th, 2009, in a moment that managed to shock Hollywood and her legions of fans from all corners of the globe. At only 32 years young, the vivacious and talented actress lay unresponsive in the bathroom of her Hollywood Hills home, which her mother Sharon Murphy had found her in. What seemed like a pretty normal day, as the night fell turned tragic, and the night landed the paramedics at her place, whisking her to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. However, despite all possible attempts, Britney was declared dead at 10:04 a.m. Sources close to the family said Britney showed flu symptoms in the days leading up to her death, including laryngitis. She had just returned from a vacation in Puerto Rico, where she had also gone to film a movie. The movie was later canceled, but the cancellation and the stress that followed appeared to be taking a toll on her health. Despite all that struggle, Britney did not let these setbacks stop her, because she truly did not know this might be a bit more serious than some in-season virus. The cause of death following autopsy was pneumonia, with iron deficiency anemia and multi-drug intoxication as contributing conditions. All the drugs that were found in her system represented legal drugs, over-the-counter drugs such as acetaminophen, and prescription drugs, including hydrocodone and chlorpheniramine. A combination of factors like this, in addition to her weak condition from the anemia, caused her death. But that was a little in the way of an explanation that did very little to dampen either public curiosity or suspicion. To many, the circumstances seemed far too strange, too sudden for someone as young and seemingly healthy as Britney. This sense of disbelief opened the door to a wave of media frenzy and wild speculation, a fire that would continue to burn for years to come. Media frenzy and speculation. When she died, besides the uncontrollable public curiosity, the media attacked the bizarre circumstances of her death. To grieve the passing of such a beloved actress was now an investigation of what exactly killed Britney. Pneumonia, anemia, and prescription drugs were an odd mix for a young person. Hence, the conspiracy theories and rumors flew. One of the most persistent theories had to do with toxic mold in the home Britney shared with her husband, Simon Monjack, and her mother, Sharon. The house in question, once belonging to pop star Britney Spears, had been a source of problems even before Britney and her family moved in. In the months that followed her death, it was said that mold could have helped her deteriorating health by exacerbating her pneumonia and giving way to her eventual death. To add to the confusion and suspicion in the public's mind, Sharon Murphy first denied such stories but later filed a suit against the builders for defective construction. Another strong theory in this direction involved the abuse of prescription drugs, usual attention seeker whenever tragedies occur in Hollywood. The lethal cocktail of medications that were found in Britney's system had been legally prescribed and called for some suspicions. Some theorized that with Britney's pressurized demands from her career and probably an ailing marriage, she had sought refuge in prescription medications. Yet there was nothing concrete to suggest deliberate abuse, and those closest to Britney included her husband, who stoutly denied any drug abuse. But the most sinister involved the possibility of foul play. The bizarre behavior of Simon Monjack in the wake of Britney's death would only fuel such suspicion. Monjack was a British screenwriter with a checkered past and one whom many described as controlling and enigmatic. His actions after Britney's death, trying to postpone the 911 call, aside from all the contradictions that he gave to media outlets, led people to believe there may be more to this story. Sure, foul play was ruled out, but whispers still kept this mystery alive. Simon Monjack's death and its similarity to Britney Murphy's death. Things began to get even weirder when Britney Murphy's husband Simon Monjack also was found dead in the same home in Hollywood Hills, just 5 months later, on 23 May 2010. In some respects, Monjack's death paralleled Britney's. Also was found unconscious by Sharon Murphy, and his cause was acute pneumonia and severe anemia, the very same two conditions that took his wife. The parallels in their deaths were striking. The media was thrown into yet another frenzy. How could two people, in the prime of their lives, die from the same conditions within such a short period. Indeed, for many, it was an enormously strange coincidence to digest in one go. Hence, speculations moved forward on what really must have caused their death. Some indeed thought that toxic mold was the culprit, and that Monjak's death was further confirmation that something in the house contributed to their illnesses. Others revisited the earlier thoughts of foul play, claiming the deaths were somehow connected, possibly even involving outside parties who stood to gain something from the couple's demise. The investigations into both deaths turned up nothing new, leaving the public with more questions than answers. Monjak's death was the tragic end to a life riddled with controversy and rumor, much as Britney's had been. Together, their deaths became one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries, a tale that would continue to fascinate and mystify the public for years to come. With such similarities, the weird events and endless rumors that they were dead sealed the story in the public imagination as a grim reminder of the perishable nature of life and those tragedies that so often cannot be explained. Sharon Murphy's silence and aftermath. Brittany Murphy's tragic, sudden death in 2009 sent shockwaves around the world, but for Sharon Murphy, it would be a close-up, personal tragedy that would change the course of her life forever. A grieving mother of one of Hollywood's most beloved stars found herself thrust into the public eye, not as a figure of sympathy, but even as a target for speculation and scrutiny. First, the death of Britney, and then, just 5 months later, that of her son-in-law, Simon Monjak, cast a long shadow over Sharon's life and launched her into 10 years of silence, many found mysterious, others telling. Sharon's grief and public scrutiny. Following Brittany Murphy's death, Sharon Murphy was at the center of the media storm. The public wanted answers, and the press hounded for a story that could make sense of such an untimely and tragic loss of a young actress in her prime. Initial reports said Brittany had died from pneumonia, complicated by anemia, and multiple drug intoxication, mostly over-the-counter medications. The explanation did little, however, to quell the rumors and speculation that began to swirl almost immediately. Sharon, who had lived with Brittany and Simon in the same Hollywood Hills home where her daughter died, was suddenly a key figure in the unfolding narrative. Her every move would be scrutinized by the media, every word, even her relationship with her daughter. Some reports indicated an unusually close relationship Sharon had with Brittany, which fed the public need to hear more salacious stories. Others blamed her for enabling Brittany's alleged drug use, or worse, for somehow being complicit in her death. The weight of these accusations, coupled with the overwhelming grief of losing her only child, pushed Sharon into emotional isolation. 5 months later, Simon Monjak was found dead in the same house under strikingly similar circumstances. The media and public started to question whether something more was going on. Various conspiracy theories ran from toxic mold within the house to foul play over the couple's finances. Within a few months, Sharon had lost a daughter and son-in-law. Once again, she was at the epicenter of the media frenzy. Sharon did not publicly counter the onslaught of negative scrutiny. That, in effect, fueled the speculation even more because some may have seen her silence as guilt, while others thought it was a desperate mother trying to save their daughter's legacy. Legal battles and investigations. But Sharon Murphy's silence did not imply she was sitting idle behind closed doors. Over the years that have passed since Brittany's death, Sharon was a party to a few legal scuffles, some of which were driven by incessant investigations into the circumstances surrounding the death of her daughter and son-in-law. One of the most serious legal actions Sharon pursued was against the constructors of her Hollywood Hills home, where Brittany and Simon died. She filed a lawsuit stating toxic mold in the house contributed to their death. This has been the focus of many people who felt the deaths were environmental rather than stated to be. However, the lawsuit eventually settled out of court, with some medical experts doubting Sharon's toxic mold claim. The mysterious nature of Brittany and Simon's deaths called for re-investigation. From Brittany's estranged father, Angelo Bertolotti, they asked various parties for the reopening of the case, because they were convinced that foul play was concerned. Bertolotti went so far as to obtain independent toxicology reports, claiming they showed evidence of heavy metals in Brittany's system, possibly from poisoning. The revelation once more kicked up public interest and placed Sharon again at the center of a controversy she had been trying to move herself away from. Despite these confrontations, Sharon had held firm in not supporting or speaking with the media and people outside about this incident. Many people viewed her silence as an act of defiance or a signal of overwhelming grief. Sharon probably knew that it was her coping mechanism, protective armor against the invasion that had been relentlessly cast upon her private grief. The impact of Sharon's silence. Sharon Murphy's silence for 10 years became perhaps the most spoken about topic concerning the case. Living in a society where even the amoeba of public figures is expected to spill one's innards out to the awaiting cameras upon any tragedy, Sharon's maintaining silence seemed almost anachronistic. Yet, it also contributed to the aura of mystery that surrounded Brittany's death. Without Sharon's voice explaining what happened, the people had to sew together a patchwork story through media reports, rumors, and conspiracy theories. The case lingered in the public imagination for several years after it broke, now and then resurfacing along with claims or new information. And with each resurfacing, some note Sharon's silence and others respect her ability to grieve in private. It was more than a decade later when Sharon finally broke her silence and gave the world a look at her heartache and reason for such a long disappearance from the limelight. Her revelations have given new insight into the tragedy and allowed the world to visualize Sharon Murphy's figure in a tragic story, also as a mother who has suffered an unimaginable loss and finally found the strength to tell her truth. Sharon Murphy breaks her silence. The exclusive interview. For over a decade, Sharon Murphy sat in the background of one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking mysteries. The world watched in horror as speculation and theories swirled around her daughter Brittany Murphy's tragic death. But Sharon chose to keep her thoughts close to her chest, retreating from the public eye. Now, in a rare and deeply emotional interview, Sharon has finally decided to break her silence, offering a unique and personal perspective on the events that have haunted her for so many years. She talks in the interview about the harrowing experience of losing her daughter so suddenly and unexpectedly. She speaks of the last days of Brittany's life, where a story is told of a very tight-knit family unit with a foreshadowing premonition in her voice about those final moments. The words of Sharon are those filled with agony and sorrow as she speaks of how Brittany collapsed inside their house, the mad attempt to save her, and the realization that Brittany was indeed gone. One of the things Sharon talks about is the crazy media attention that is hyper-obsessed over Brittany's death. She speaks candidly about the tabloid headlines, the prying questions, and the incessant speculations that only helped further her sorrows. According to Sharon, the inordinate attention the media gave her made it impossible to mourn in private. Instead, it whisked her into the spotlight situation she never wanted. She claimed that she had done this all along because she wanted to preserve Brittany's memory and herself, too, from the unending public curiosity regarding her. Sharon talks about how her silence affected the storytelling in the case of Brittany's death. She grants that by choosing not to speak, she may have allowed misinformation and wild theories to take hold earlier. But she makes it very clear that her ultimate considerations were, and will continue to be, her family and the dignity of her daughter. This interview is the first time Sharon felt ready to answer the people's questions and hopes by telling her story that she can finally set the record straight. As Sharon opens up, she reveals several new revelations that could drastically change the public's perception of the tragedy. Perhaps one of the most shocking pieces of information she'll reveal is her theory about what might have caused Brittany's sudden decline in health. Although she doesn't ring in on any one explanation, Sharon hints at environmental elements in their home that some might suggest were linked to her daughter's illness. She points to the chronic dampness and mold in their house, which she believes could have weakened Brittany's immune system. This casts new light on the highly controversial toxic mold hypothesis that, although widely panned at the time, does not seem so impossible with Sharon's revelation. New insights also emerge from Sharon into the relationship Brittany shared with her husband Simon Monjack. She dispels some of the more damaging rumors about Simon and shows him to be a man who is deeply devoted to Brittany, though flawed and troubled. Sharon speaks to shared grief and loss that bonded them in the months leading up to Simon's untimely death only 5 months after Brittany's passing. She speaks about the emotional vulnerabilities concerning these serial tragedies, describing how it was hard to muster the strength to carry on after losing a daughter and son-in-law in so short a time. Another key insight is when Sharon speaks about the various reinvestigations that have taken place since Brittany's death in various legal battles. She shares her frustration with the DAS and courts, along with the challenges she had in trying to find out what happened to her daughter. Sharon says it is the constant delays and dead ends that left her feeling helpless and disenchanted, one of the reasons she pulled herself from the public eye. Sharon's reflections on Britney's legacy. Throughout the interview, Sharon sends deep reflections on Britney's legacy, offering her heartfelt sentiment that her daughter be remembered as a bright, talented, and caring individual. With pride, she talks about Britney's action in the film industry but insists that her daughter be remembered for her spirit and generosity. She remembers how Britney would go out of her way to help people in need, whether through charitable donations or just being a good friend to her friends. She wants the world to remember Britney not just as a star, but as someone who loved and cared for people around her and made their lives more joyful. Sharon also talked about the dark legacy of Britney's and why people are fascinated by the mystery surrounding her death. She said she could understand why people were fascinated with the story, but she implores people to look beyond those salacious headlines and appreciate Britney's life in its entirety. Sharon said she hoped that sharing her side of the story could move the legacy from the tragedy of Britney's death to the beauty of her life. She would want Britney's legacy to be one of resiliency, love, and creativity, a legacy that will continue far beyond when the speculation has died down. Britney's death and its impact on Hollywood. Britney's death sent shockwaves into Hollywood, a place where personal life is merged with public life in desperation for fame. At 32, Britney's death was a stark reminder to many young actors of the pressures and challenges youngsters face in the entertainment industry. For many others, her death symbolized the dark underbelly of the glitter of Hollywood that masks the isolation, anxiety, and stress that often accompany success. In the years since her death, Britney's story has served as a cautionary tale to young actors trying to brave the treacherous waters of stardom. Indispositions concerning the psychological and physical consequences, one would say, of fame seekers, especially when catapulted to stardom at such a tender age, started to be openly discussed by industry insiders. Full of life and on-screen verve, Britney was a sensitive and shy soul. Pressures to maintain her public persona coupled with the unsavory glare of the media always on her might have summed up the circumstances surrounding her tragic death. She passed away amidst a bigger cry for more care and support to be accorded to the industry. Mental health advocates started calling for resources to be more accessible to young actors, such as access to counseling, wellness programs, and safeguards from pressures very particular to their profession. It was the jolting reminder that sometimes the price one must pay for fame can be high, as is expected from the cruel, unforgiving world of entertainment. Britney's death marked a pivotal moment in how the industry looks after its stars. While not the greatest of tragedies, Britney's case opened the eyes of many and made all concerned realize their vulnerability with so many young actors in the limelight, bringing wider and more pervasive discussions on mental health and providing an infrastructure of support. Public reaction to Sharon's revelations. When Sharon Murphy finally came forward, those years of speculation and rumor were broken with an immediate and intense public and media response. Sharon had decided to speak about the death of her daughter, her more than a decade of quiet mourning, and, in the process, brought fresh attention to the tragic story that was never quite out of the nation's consciousness. For many, Sharon's interview was a labor of courage and an act of strength. Having lost her daughter so terribly and publicly, Sharon's ability to speak the truth hit home with those who followed Britney's career and, indeed, the mystery following her tragic death. Her revelations brought new light to happenings before Britney's death and made this human tragedy even more personal, which only a mother could relate to. It was a story the media couldn't ignore, one in which, over the years, sensationalism and speculation about Britney's death had been perpetuated time and again. Now, some reworked their tone. Where sensationalism once commanded the story, they redirected toward the human side. Sharon's interview reframed the discussion and shifted it toward an empathetic, understanding approach to the tragedy. Not all of the reactions were positive. Some further went ahead to question the timing of Sharon's revelations and speculation on her motive. Of course, this is an era of social media where opinions are decidedly divided and reactions unforgiving. Her interview was bound to receive accolades and skepticism in equal measure, but her decision to come out and talk after so many years of keeping shut provided an added element to the story: their impression about Britney herself as well as her mother. Tragedy in retrospect. When one looks at the tragedy that was Brittany Murphy's death, there are wider ramifications to her story. Brittany's death was that of an immensely talented actress, but a poignant reminder that life is fragile in the cold, ruthless world of Hollywood. Her death and all that has been brought to light by her mother since then serve to show there is still a great need for compassion, understanding, and empathy in the way we discuss and interpret the lives of public figures. It is in describing the last days of Brittany that Sharon Murphy opens a door to suffering and pain that those close to Brittany have to endure. She provokes us beyond the salacious headlines and sensational stories to remember that behind every public figure, there was a human being with his struggles, fears, and vulnerabilities. In the end, Brittany's story is truly a tragedy, but it is an instructive one of self-examination. And so, while we ponder life and death, with their deep impacts upon those who have known and loved her, we remember with greater awareness and support all those people who are sometimes, like Brittany, fighting in silence. Sharon's revelations do not come as all of the answers, but thoroughly offer an important perspective that can tell much to enable us to understand the complexities of the human experience, especially those that come through loud in the high-pressure world of Hollywood.